Okay, hello to everyone online as well, and apologies again for those moments when the room around erupts and you guys aren't part of it, but we'll have to go with that. Yeah, so I'll just start. Yeah, the comment as I came in, a question on the art of conversation. Is that also now an art? And I was thinking the last talk I did here was called the art of living. So I'm not super creative with my topics. I just take something and put the art of because everything can be an art ultimately. Yeah, so what I'm doing tonight is I am sharing just on a book I've read, Friendship and the Political. So yeah, first I want to, so one thing is I'm going to give an introduction because I tend to not do that and just jump in to the point where my thesis supervisor told me one day, writing a thesis or writing something, you're not writing a thriller. Tell the people up front what you're going to tell them. Give the punchline away, and then help the people follow you. So Abby, my wife, also told me when I sort of practiced on her, she stopped me and said, just remember, it's not a thriller. Help us come with you. So yeah, I'll move on from that. There we go. So that is the book by Graham Smith. Yeah, so why I read this book, or why I bought this book in the first place, it was while I was studying and I worked a bit on Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy and got into the existentialists and their view and their cause more broadly in thought. But as a Christian, I should at some stage look into Kierkegaard. And I walked past a bookshop where this book was half price or something, and Kierkegaard was there on the cover, and I thought, okay, he's even talking to Nietzsche and Schmidt, who I've got no idea who was then. But this seems like a good place to start. I bought the book only last year. I read another book on Kierkegaard, and now I'm more intrigued by him, so I picked it up this year again. And just why Smith wrote this book is he's a political theorist who wrote the book for other political theorists, proposing a better way to think about politics and political action. He seeks to redeem friendship as a term for describing interpersonal bonds between people and that on which all politics rests. And he suggests that friendship might help them do better at understanding the political and understand why certain political actions happen. And he's also seen it as a term often missing in modern political theory. So, but I'll get more into his case as I go on for that. Then the other important question is obviously, why do we, or us non-political theorists, why would we read it, or why would we want to know about it? I think, so as we go through the thinkers that he puts forward, each thinker exposes something about our engagement with others and invites us to rethink our position towards others, and asks us almost what shapes our posture towards others, whether we approach others as a friend, as an enemy, as a neighbor, or even is there other categories? And I think we might also find as we start digging into this that friendship is actually, it's quite a mysterious concept. We all we know what it is, but can we actually distinguish it from all other relationships? Is it that distinguishable? And we'll also see as we go through, we'll see the good and the bad that you hear. You'll probably find that it's all part of your ways that you befriend people, your attempts at befriending others. And I think the other thing for us gathering here in online KRUX is following from Lishan's, the talk she did last week. She spoke about pursuing the beautiful and becoming or being people who makes beauty or who makes things beautiful as that aspect of our Christian lives. And this is also very much what friends or friendship is about, and how people thought about it, especially the ancient thinkers. This is very much about bringing about harmony in the world. That is what they aim for, and what they try to achieve. And yeah, sort of there's always this searching for fulfillment in some way. And even as we gather here tonight, we are friends gathering, seeking something, and relying on one another for that, and hoping we can give it to one another. We'll see. Yeah. So just to continue breaking down the thriller, I'll do Smith's The Cause, his cause, why he wrote this book, what he wanted to achieve with it. In short, he talks about relocating friendship to the center of political theory and political thinking, why there's a need for it, and also why does modern thinkers, contemporary thinkers, they almost see friendship as an enemy of the political, or there are people working on it, writing on it, like Smith. I think there's also a lot of theologians and Christians working on that topic, but it's not as central as it ought to be, according to him. Then I'll look at the foundations of the concept of friendship, the word, and how people thought about it, and that continue to shape when we say friends, when we talk about friends. So the ancient philosophers, Plato, Aristotle. The three modern guys are the guys that you see on the book cover. So that is Kierkegaard in the middle. On the left is Nietzsche and Schmidt on your right. Why them? Also, yeah, Smith will clarify, as there are others who do work on it.
Why Schmidt green?
Green.
Is he envious of the others?
Well, you'll also, I don't know. I'm colorblind, so I would not know that it's green. But
his copper is aging.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, you'll still meet him as we go on. Yeah, I think also, yeah, some of you, when I get to these guys, all the other thinkers, I'm going to try obviously in super condensed version. And yeah, I'd also love to hear, I think someone like, almost said Nietzsche, Lucian knows
not much difference.
knows Nietzsche
nihilism.
better than I do, and so I'd also love to hear from her and others. Yeah, when I touch on topics in the end, to just hear how you understand that person possibly, and share on that. And then in the end, I'm going to get to my title, Friendship and the Art of Conversation, and why I feel political and conversation is interchangeable. So, Smith, I will be reading quite a bit, so it's just easier for everyone and for you. Smith, he wrote the book to make the case for relocating friendship as central rather than irrelevant, or even harmful to the political and to the practice of politics. It was once considered indispensable to political talk, political theory. You don't talk politics without talking about the friend and friendship. Whereas contemporary thinkers think of it as more at odds with the political. So just three clarifying concepts, or how I understand he uses it, is the political speaks of maybe the non-private, not the private world, the sphere where politics happen. The Greeks use the word polis, that part of the city where those things happen, as opposed to all the other activities in the city. That's not the political. The practice of politics, of course, is all engagements in the political, but I think definitely for Smith, also actually all activities of friendship ultimately, or at some level at least, that shape the political. And friendship, for starters, will refer to a particular bond existing between person and person. And what Smith argues is the foundational relationship underlying all politics. So what the political theorist must study. I'm not going to keep making his point over and over. But so what he would argue is though the political, even though it might also, it plays out most vividly inside the polis, it is concerned with what happens in the shared world outside the polis. And getting now to the contemporary suspicion of friendship. The modern mind thinks of friendship, when we talk about it, typically we think of all friendship as what Smith will continue to call the common sense view of friendship. That thing we sort of know, oh, those two people are friends, they're friends. You see it by people's behavior. That is friendship. It's not what you expect to see necessarily in Parliament when you watch Parliament television. So it's something based in affection and in particularity, specific persons you choose out as friends. And it's expected that we link friendship, therefore, with ideas that it involves favoritism. If it goes into politics, you'll see nepotism. There will be unfairness because you will treat your friend better. There's partiality. And the other thing is the modern view has in many ways also shifted from friendship to power, that politics is about power. So if you bring friendship into that, then power will be used for certain people against others. And so we associate these interfering friendships. We think of it really as almost interfering with a commitment towards all constituents. Should a politician or someone of influence have friends or relate politically to friends? So we associate it almost with a type of tribal politics, and where we rely more on concepts like the rule of law, procedural justice, various rights to safeguard us against the sovereign or the state's abuse of that power. So friendship has its place in the private to be enjoyed or to be lived, but when you enter the polis, friendship ties should no longer count or should no longer be as strong. So what Smith suggests, that the error in this thinking lies in that politics, in the idea that politics is at all possible without conceiving of persons as operating in a shared space, in sharing various friendship bonds, not even one, but various at once. And such politics will involve theories about the atomized and individual in its world, without considering that individual active in the world outside, in a shared world, as a friend in friendships. And for him, such politics is not really politics at all, not considering the individual acting out there. It's rather, it will be tyranny of some degree. And he sees, Smith sees the value of this view, of the modern view of friendship, as only the individual. And for him, it's just that something is lost if we don't consider it as much broader, as more ambiguous in some ways. So I'm not going to go too deeply in this claim of his now, but just to illustrate the complexity of the narrow common sense view, that we want to say friendship is only certain types of very specific, even friendly, as opposed to less friendly relationships. I'm going to just ask a bunch of questions that he put forward, or the main questions in 3 categories. And you can think through them. I do want to move on to a slide. Oh, those are just good quotes that I wanted to put up there, but I'm going to skip past them. I forgot about those. So those are just, it's different friendships happening there and illustrated, and which in some way illustrates the complexity, but also the some of the questions you'll be asking. You'll see a little boy with a dog there. You'll see children together. You'll see grown-ups together. You will see people drinking milkshakes. You'll see in the
just some strangers.
And in the top left corner, those aren't friends. Those are. It is the seductive act of love, whereas the middle top picture is by the same artist, but those are friends. But how are they different? That was my, and I think it's part of the thing. Like, what's the difference between the two? Can you tell if it's not super explicit? Between those two is also that same artist. That's a picture of befriending the self. So it's another type of friendship. So I'm going to ask these questions, and then as you look at those images, you can think through it and maybe nod along or think what you think of these. So the first question questions revolve around: are two people friends merely for the sake of each other on grounds of character and personality? If so, how much change can such relationships endure? Do two people stop being friends when the character or personality of one changed too much? If so, were they attracted to the other for the sake of the other, or to a set of characteristics and behavior despite the other person? If they were attracted to a set of characteristics and behavior, why were they attracted to this particular person with this set and not others with a similar set? So that's one set of questions. The next one is about how far does friendship map onto other relationships? Can parents and children be friends? Can siblings be friends, and can they choose to be friends? Is choice essential to friendship? Are marriage partners the closest of friends, or not really friends at all? Does love count as friendship? Are business partners, colleagues, or teammates friends? And what distinguishes people who pursue common interests from true friends? Can friendship merely be based around utility or pleasure, or does it need something more to be called friendship? That was the second set. The third one is, what are the numerical limits of friendship? Also in the pictures, you'll obviously see twos, but also there's groups, like our milkshake drinkers. What are the numerical limits to friendship, and what difference does the category of a possible friend make, whether they are acquaintance or even if there's maybe class differences? Are members of a circle of friends all friends with each other, or are they friends of the group or through one another to the group? Can people from different backgrounds or ages be friends? Can people have friendships with animals? Can people have, or with abstract ideas like truth or justice or freedom, where someone is a friend of freedom or a friend of whatever? Can countries or organizations be friends? And a question which will also come up in the book, of which I'm going to read a little in the end, is, through the ages, can men and women be friends? So for Smith, without doing away or diminishing the common sense view of friendship as a unique, intimate bond between two people, he believes there is much to gain from drawing attention to the broader spectrum of friendships. And so my summary of his argument, or what he's trying to get to in this book, is that friendship cannot be theoretically limited to very specific, exclusive interpersonal relationships, while it is understood as central to our very being in this world. And therefore, it ought to be central to all political thought. So now we can move on from Smith, the political theorist. And now I'm going to our first ancients. I had some fun with my art, with my slide art. But so that, zoom in, that is the two middle guys is Plato and Aristotle, who they represent. And whenever I talk about Socrates, he's sort of, I think, warped into Plato, because I think he mostly appears in Plato's work. We don't know, like with all things, we don't know if there actually was a Socrates, but we believe there was. But they were all each other's scholars. A thing to mention is what they're doing there. Plato pointing up is pointing to the forms and the ideal and the perfect, and that was his pursuit and what a lot of his work was about, pursuing those. We will touch on it as we go on with Aristotle, being more for the things of this world, and with his hand down and seeing more how it plays out here and how people live their purpose here and how all things sort of follow their purpose towards their ends here. So moving on into them. So in the ancient world, as I mentioned, for all these guys and other great minds, friendship was a standard theme all throughout their work. And it's very much part of their work and how they did their work. They were concerned with a harmonious society and therefore with the good and the beautiful that they hope to achieve through that. And again, as I go through these people, I want you to listen to them, to hear. So often I'll just drop ideas of theirs or things how they deal even with these questions that Smith asked beforehand about these challenging questions about friendship. And just to make crosses and ticks in your mind, what you like, what you don't like, or what you think of that, and also see how especially their ideas persist through the thinkers, but maybe in other forms. So Socrates argued that only people with a vision of the good are suited for leadership, for only they could frame just laws and achieve harmony in society. But this flows, of course, and very much for them, from a concern for all people, not simply for the elite, for all people would partake in that harmony. Friendship is seen to be a universal binding force that leads to harmony, justice, and concern for all others, including generations to come. Then friendship is considered an attraction based on a striving to identify and attain the good, whether, and again, that is what Plato also was about. It's that striving for the pure form, of which we see various forms or imitations here, but all forms are striving to ultimately be, well, more, I don't know how they connect with the pure, but at least be more like the pure. So it could be those, so the important thing is striving towards it, but it's never what an individual does. It's people do it together, society does it together. And whether you are at the bottom end or at the top end of society, you fulfill your role so the whole society can achieve it together, and enter that space together. So friendship existed between peers, it existed between an educator and a student, also patrons of the noble class and their servants, they were friends, or even people they might sponsor, or afterwards, I don't know, James maybe, or someone, a question I would also ask on that is friendship with Christ or Jesus being a friend, what that means, or all of what that could mean. In that, where there's a higher and a lower party involved. So friendship, it involved a desire for the good in ourselves and in others, and for that to be achieved, and a desire for it to be achieved so that the whole city could be harmonious. And therefore we welcome all laws that will help a city or a society go there, and help us to love the right things, which is that we read James Smith's that you are what you love, and the Augustinian idea of learning to love the right things. And that's sort of also the love that they try to cultivate through these friendships. But it goes beyond just the good itself to also to just attaining the good, but to reproduce the good and to immortalize the good and the desire for good. So there's very much, if we are no longer here, the posterity will follow, and they need to take it up and pursue that from there. And so even the forms of friendship I showed earlier on the slide, there are different forms of friendship, they are not the pure form. They are all pursuing the pure form. So yeah, friendship has an undeniably important role to play in living the good life. And yet it remained mysterious. It remained a matter of, it left a lot of questions. And to be able to answer those questions, people gathered as friends. They needed to be friends to figure out even what is friendship. So here's now 5 questions, and these 5 questions run all through. And you might have heard some of them in Smith earlier. So that Plato posed. So number 1, is there a connection between friendship and being useful or good? Is reciprocity important? Is the lover or the loved? Is it the lover or the loved who is truly said to be the friend? So do they, I give, you give. Is that important to be called friendship, as opposed to any other relationship? Does similarity or dissimilarity draw friends together? Does friendship have a purpose or a goal? Those quotes that I skipped earlier, I'm going to put them up just for a while so you can read them as I go on. I think they touch a bit on that. Yeah, just on those words. So you can read it while I go on. So it asks, does friendship have a purpose or a goal? Or is it its own goal? The 5th question is, does friendship result from sufficiency or deficiency? So do we lack something? Is that why we're trying to attain the other, that good, but also the other person? Or is it because we are actually whole, and only whole people can be true friends that enter the political arena and decide what is good for everyone? Does that make them friends, as opposed to insufficient people become friends and sufficient people? Yeah. So yeah, the pursuit of beauty cannot happen without dialogue and creating room for skepticism that asks the necessary questions to further this great endeavor towards harmony. Finishing with Plato, Smith's conclusion on him is that, sorry, I'm going to skip some of it just for time's sake. I don't think we need to hear his conclusion. I'm going to go then on to Aristotle. Okay. But so the one thing that he does, okay, let me highlight this, that the good with a capital G is singular, and there's only one way to order the soul of a person and a city. So the good is singular, and we all pursue that good. And so in a sense, we probably will all flow together towards it when everything works well and everyone fulfills their role. Then going on to Aristotle, he draws on Plato's themes, but he questions and speaks into our lived realities, addressing our everyday and mundane concerns. So for him, it's very much building it out into, okay, but what does it then look like when we pursue these things out? It's not just forms out there, but it's actually rather the good almost grows through this world and grows and through us, and we must discover, therefore, we must walk with it and pursue our end and become properly human. So he was interested in how the world works and also how various partial communities work in this world, where I can be in this community, but I'm also in my office in another community, I'm in my family, so I'm in various partial communities, and all these partial communities also coexist and play a role together in shaping this world, and ultimately the overarching community and purpose. So it's the whole mechanics of the thing that he's more interested in. But he also understood that friendship is the answer to the question of what binds communities together. And so in him, friendship appears to be a form of duty, almost a type of duty each person fulfills within their partial community and their partial communities, and towards other partial communities. So to help the overarching community flourish. That's what he was about. He also defines friendship in terms of various categories which map onto all relations that form the polis together. So there's different. That's basically what I've discussed now. And for him, reciprocation is a crucial characteristic, that there must be giving or receiving. And there's also almost 3 types of friendships. There's a friendship of utility, which is maybe like our business friendships, trade. There's one of pleasure, which is enjoying things together, or it's also about getting pleasure from one another. So one friendship can be one of utility for one and pleasure for the other. And then an exchange happened and both parties are happy. He also had this, the third one is the virtue friendship. And that's sort of the high one, where you pursue becoming human and developing your character, building that out. And so in that, he had an idea of equality, which is again, obviously very foreign to us. So if I was one of noble standing and I trade and I employ someone, we actually see that still today in a different form. I employ someone, I give him very little, he gives me maybe a lot, but I agreed to give him what I gave him, and he agreed to give me what he gave me, his labor. Then it was an equal relationship, for he gave what he had to give and I gave what I had to give, and we fulfill each other's needs. He has money, I have a job done. There's equality in yeah. I hope I'm not butchering that. That's how I understood it. So he also, what he also does, he acknowledges individual conceptions of the good, that there is diversity in understanding purpose. So individuals, there is a place for individuals with separate purposes. And I think that's also where that can happen. It's not just like, say that every person's purpose looks exactly the same, or all men's purpose looks like this and all women's look like this. There's individuality involved in that. Then moving on from that, yeah, I mentioned the most complete form of friendship for him is the virtue friendship, and that is what people in the political sphere really engage with. And they are not, that's beyond pleasure, that's beyond just utility. They are building themselves, building the society, building the world. Okay, sorry, I'm just reading, but I've said what I wanted to say. And yeah, also because it's in that, where in the political friendship in the political sphere is also where you can be almost the ultimate friend. And I almost understand it as a friend to all and a friend of all, because now you're in a space where I can make decisions that help everyone. Or say I am a philosopher king, I can now be truly a friend to all, because I can impact everyone and shape everyone's good on their behalf. And they give what they can give. For him, it's not a friendship, it's not a status, but it's primarily an activity. So again, he's a man with a hand down. It happens here, it happens in our lives, it's visible, it happens within the material. And also if friendship lays dormant for too long, and yeah, I don't know about this, because it's one of those, you have these friends that you can see every 10 years and you're like that. And then, but he also talks about that it's actually a thing that must be ongoing and happening. So for him, maybe those aren't friendships, that what I just explained. It's an acted thing. So reading Smith's summary again here. So yeah, for him, he notes that the failure for him of Aristotle is that he's not fully appreciating the emotional aspects of friendship. It's important that friends understand one another or get to know one another or belong to one another. And for him, it must go beyond simply acting towards one another, but also they must be with one another and get something there. Which I don't know where that featured in Aristotle's thinking, or if that's assumed more, if it was a concern of his in that sense. I'm now going to go on to the three modern thinkers. I don't know if there's any pressing questions or comments right now. Otherwise, I'm happy to power on.
I'm sure we have a million questions, but I want to see where you're going with this first.
Yeah, it's probably better to try and finish, and then we can have a proper, and we can get everyone on. So the three modern transformations of friendship that Smith turns to, he's seeking to understand how a person can be bonded to a person in our modern world characterized by pluralism. So there's no longer the one good to which we all strive, and it's not even just that because in Aristotle there's room for diversity in a sense, but I think we're also now in a world that we've often spoken about where there's even different truths altogether, which so for him it's about, okay, where do we go in this world? How do we think about friendship in this world? And who do we befriend? No longer pursuing just a single good. And why he chooses these three is because they're prominent modern thinkers who had something explicit to say about friendship. So they did focus on that. And among the three, they also reveal the modern tensions and challenges to friendship, which is things like individualism, the nation state, the thinning of social fabric, probably part of the individualism and atomization, and how this shapes our view of what the role of the political is in the first place in society. Are they simply there to offer certain protections, or are they actually there to care for the whole society, and to what extent? And yeah, I'm going to present each view. Also, the way I'm not presenting it like that, but I think it's the question I learned to ask last year in general and of everything is, if someone says something, ask what are they trying to avoid? What are they trying to avoid when they say that? Because I think we often try to avoid the same things, we'll discover. But yeah, I saw it also, and I think it's also what drew me to this, as just all the political debates of last year. People say stuff and we hear, wow, what a stupid thing to say. But also, what are they actually trying to avoid? So in these guys, I can summarize it in some way. Kierkegaard is trying to avoid losing God, or maybe his soul, his own soul, also just himself as his soul. But Nietzsche is definitely, he's trying to avoid losing himself. And yeah, see why? In Schmidt's case, who's the fascinating man in green, who is the shocking figure among them, that part is a thriller.
What's he scared of?
He's trying not to lose against his enemies. So Kierkegaard, among the thinkers, he's the one that uniquely casts. Okay, so Kierkegaard is the handsome fellow who takes up most of the picture.
Guys are the same age.
That's what I'm trying. Yeah. So yeah, he's the one of all the thinkers that casts friendship in a uniquely theistic and very specifically Christian context. The two questions he was concerned about, and which is my story at the beginning, why I was drawn to him and wanting to know him, know what he says, to me is, what does it mean to be a person, and what does it mean to be a Christian? And so how the self relates to others is a crucial question, but also part of a threefold relation. All selves must relate first to God, and in doing so, you're able to properly relate to yourself and to others. So befriend God first, if I may use that term, then so that you may properly befriend yourself and befriend others. Although Kierkegaard might not like me using that word. So he challenges any attempt to substitute this presentation, which I've just explained, of humans, and as the ancients did with their idea of ethical friendships or romantic love even. I think Lishan also mentioned in a talk somewhere where you mentioned him last year. So for him, he is very radical. He is not about trying to get to the fun or pleasure friendships or the ethical friendships, and even, yeah, I don't know what he makes of the virtue friendships. He's just a form of that, but for him it's more a spiritual matter to raise above the ethical and pleasurable. So for him, human friendships, and what we've described up to now, offers no moral task, for it's in a sense a matter of fortune whether you find such friendship or not. And while fortune may favor some more than others, all friendship is still also a matter of preference. It's a choice to enjoy something or someone. So Plato, he asked, among his questions, there was this question of similarity or dissimilarity, which draws people to one another. Sufficiency, deficiency. Is it because you need something more to become more yourself, or do you first have to be fully yourself before you can be a friend? So Kierkegaard, he criticizes friendship, the whole just friendship. It's not great. For it's not admiring the other as a total self, but only for particular features of that self, which I referred to earlier, or which was the question I think Plato also asked, or Smith or someone, everyone. Yeah, so let me get my spot. Yeah, so for him, he sees that as a misrelation of the self, while in the process, friendship is also, while it does that, it's also cutting those 2 or 3 or narrow groups of people off from everyone else. And so they are no longer truly other orientated. So it's sub-Christian for him. And so reciprocity, which is so central for Aristotle, Kierkegaard considers that is a sign of selfishness, and people love others only to receive love in turn. That is why they do that. And he suspects that the desire of offering love in the first place is to have it returned. So he advocates for bonding that's a kind of a spiritual friendship. And so he doesn't want friendship. He talks about the neighbor, which is obviously a very familiar to Bible readers and others who's heard of the Bible. So yeah, so he urges individuals to recognize themselves as spiritual beings and to first relate to or befriend God. For in that they will recognize the commandment to love their neighbor and to relate to all others as spiritual equals. That's where equality features for him. And so what being a neighbor is not reciprocal, but it is proactive, and it's something you do to others, whether they chose to be your neighbor or not. But they become your neighbor by your activity towards them. And while friendship as changing humans as its reference point, and that earlier question of, okay, but you became friend with this person, they're no longer themselves, they're so different, or can't be their friend anymore. In being a neighbor as God as the reference point, not another person. So a person can change, a person can become bad, a person can reject you. You can continue being neighbor towards them because they're not that relevant in that choice. So, and yeah, another interesting thing is that the ideal form of love for Kierkegaard is loving the dead. For they have no chance to reciprocate, and we know that they can't. So if you can honor your father, your mother, a commitment, maybe a promise you made to someone, taking care of their children, things like that, that is from the purest form of friendship, because you're definitely not getting anything back. Yeah, that's an interesting question.
You definitely get stuff back from the ancestors.
I don't know. Yeah, Kierkegaard believed he didn't. So I'm just saying what these guys. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with anything I'm saying. But yeah, so Smith's criticism again, and maybe Smith is very big on the emotions, because his criticism for Kierkegaard is again that he shows too little regard for the emotions of either the neighbor, and he goes out of his way maybe, or the start eliminate the true communion, again, being with people. Yeah, I don't know. I think much of these things are good they did on the friendship side of things there. Which brings me to Nietzsche. So I posted him actually on there with friends. Well, so those were.
I thought those were the Avengers.
Yeah, so yeah, he's the guy with the He's the guy with the mustache. Oh, is it actually people posing as them? No, I think it's the actual picture. Well, let's say it's the actual cover. There were people doing imitations of this, but those are the real guys. So often in his project of becoming that self that he tried to avoid losing. So friendship was also a very dangerous thing for him. I think those were the two people, or at least part of the group, that he actually really desired to be friends with them, and for them to be those other whole self-sufficient people with who he can actually be the friends that they can.
So who are those people?
No. It's some other names.
It's the girl. I think her name was Salome or something like that. They were students together. You were in love with her.
Yeah.
But they wanted to have like
The reasonable
Yeah.
friend zone troubles.
But then I think she ran off with the other guy.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That the great writers on these things, I think that's right. Yeah. So it didn't work out for him, and so I'm going to go through some of his stuff here as well. So that's why also in the end he turned almost beyond towards civilization, trying to raise civilization almost to that level instead of just the individuals. So he had early hopes of friendship, but it was later eclipsed by his commitment to being the sovereign individual, which is also where that whole idea, the Übermensch, Superman, fits in with that person that is the future self, so that as people are friends and do their friend thing properly, next generations will eventually just become more and greater humans. And I'm not sure how well he said what that was in the end. I didn't go that much into that. But he certainly reconnects friendship again to the task of philosophy, like the ancient philosophers, insofar that it means transcending oneself or becoming a true self. So friends are those who assist one another along this journey of self-overcoming, even by becoming enemies or moving apart. So I was even thinking of some of these things sort of your hardcore business tycoons, people in the mafia, they kill each other, but they also, you know, they push each other towards being more, or in sport or whatever. So your enemy can be your friend, and that is helping you becoming more. Even if he teaches you how to ignore him or resist the stuff he does to you. So yeah, whoever helps you along the way to become that true enduring self acts as your friend. Friendship is helpful. He sees it as helpful in that it allows more perspectives on who you are. So he had this whole idea also of perspectivism, and how more and more perspectives of something will give us ultimately a truer view of it. And so the same was applied to him when he wanted to make the self his self. So the more people's opinions I can get in, the more I can know. But it's also dangerous because it blurs multiple people's identities and threaten the course of individuality and transcendence towards the truer self. So the more I become friends with others, the more I become like them, or we develop similar tastes, or we begin to love the same things, and then you must get out or get away, because then the true self is, and it's a gift insofar, as it's an opportunity to be shaped. But he also calls it a gift in the sense of it's a skill that some people have, the gift of friendship. And it's again, I don't know, did he have it? Did he not? Because maybe no, he didn't in the end. But not just because he lost his friends, but I mean, even if he became the Ubermensch, he would have said he did have the gift because he used it the right way, but he failed. So maybe there is not such a mensch. He distinguishes between selves or friends, people, as ladders or circles. So the ladder, or it's a form of doing friendship. The ladder seeks a friend for each step of his development. So different people, there is, I think, something of the ancients in that different people can play a different role in different time of your life. You know, sometimes also people come in and out of your life at different times. The circle attracts a variety of personalities who cluster around him. So the talent of the ladder is not only revealed in its ability to find an appropriate friend for the appropriate time or need, but also in overcoming that friend. So to know when, you move on, you find a better friend for this time. So a friend who has changed for him, so maybe the one that you move on from, also has the danger that they become what he called a ghost. And so it's like those in the realm of the dead. And it becomes this unsettling presence haunting yourself because you've moved on from them, but they're actually still here. They're still shaky, they're still. And so it's interesting also Kierkegaard's commitment to the dead versus his inability to shake the dead, but wanting to shake them. And the talent of the circle is, again, not only to hold different aspects of themselves or different faces towards different friends and relate to different friends differently, but also to hold the different aspects of their friends together. It's almost to help their friends be friends and remain friends. So that's the skill of friendship in that sense. But you're doing it all so that you can grow. So your project is you, ultimately. The person who has overcome himself, who is sufficient, is capable of solitude and of being a friend to himself. Only such a person can truly be themselves in the presence of other and not begin to mimic the other or get drawn into the other. For they will not seek to blur into or imitate the other in any way. And yet, such a person, if there is such a person, needed friendship to become that sovereign self. So, this ambiguous conclusion was followed by departure of this project of friendship, as many things happened, and he slowly shifted also from self-discovery to self-creation and the bigger task of creation. So he moved away also from the idea that people discover the world, but also more towards we create the world and we must create the world. And so he moved to what was broader known as, well, for him, the evolution of European civilization, somewhere along the way. So the Übermensch and the introspective concern to transform the self was abandoned for the creative transformation of all of society. His focus was still, in some ways, as I read this, on a creative, maybe Übercast, or people, as opposed to, or within a people. And again, maybe that's sort of that political class of the ancients. There's similarities there, as opposed to the common people and their commonality, which is their traditions, their values, their institutions, and all things that make them all similar. But there's a few who can enter out of that. Then, over to Carl Schmitt. Yeah, that's a young photo of him. There's also, he also became older. Yeah, but he didn't, I mean, he aged well. The thing is why I opted for his younger photo is because that's the only photo that helped PowerPoint give me this layout of photos. So if I do the older one, it's not nice. Yeah. So, and also the other thing I thought, because you'll hear about it now, I thought sometimes people, and papers do it when they want to portray a bad guy in the paper, they put a bad, unflattering photo of him in the paper, which I don't think is unfair. So I thought I'll give this guy a good picture for a, yeah. So who is this guy? No. So Smith, the writer of the book, he calls Carl Schmitt the unavoidable and problematic contributor to our understanding of friendship. And we still see it around us, that understanding. And he's one of the few thinkers in the 20th century to tackle friendship. And he not only promotes it as a public category, but also places it at the very center of political thought. So what is wrong with this guy? He's doing it all right. And as you might have guessed, he was a Nazi.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, but don't be too quick to pull up your nose at him. Because, yeah, as I said, we might some of our own tendencies in him. So,
Nou, voor ik zou water
so Schmitt, what? No, he's not. I think he's very simple and unimaginative. He takes the easy route. So Schmitt, he deploys the friend-enemy distinction as a tool to create controversy. And his device is it doesn't only weaves conflict into political groups, but it structures private concerns in such a way that conflict intensifies there. So even when we think outside the polis, the old private, it goes in there because the political does flow in there. And so for him, he sees friendship as part of a wider structure which privileges the authoritarian nation state. So instead of God being the reference point or another human being being the reference point, for him, the nation state and its authority is the reference point. So the individual is always swallowed up as part of an homogeneous group as opposed to other distinct groups. And the result being that friends entail enemies, and that peace and equality with some entails inequality and violence towards others. And his account reinforces the very structures of power that friendship in the modern or no, that friendship, when it's that in the common sense view of friendliness and all the nice things, promises to disrupt. His friendship, puts that back in the structure. So the other thing with his work never produced a rounded definition of a friend, but its content is rather inferred from what he says more overtly about the enemy, or who is framed as existential threat. And it's also derived from the unity that's required for the success of and which is imposed by the state. So those things tell us more ultimately what is a friend in his language. Because, like I said, the state is the reference point. So Smith's building blocks for what the political consists of, I wrote Smith, but it's actually Schmidt, not Smith, are peoples in plural. So peoples are the building blocks, and bonds between person and person are mediated by a sovereign state. So they decide how peoples ought to relate. Once friends and enemies are chose for you by the state, essentially, because it's not you walk into it, you're born into it. So friendship is not a relationship between individuals, but rather the identification of an existing group. So you know who your friends are because they're your group and your people. Schmidt, he does not, so for him also, he does not propose a solution, of course, towards achieving harmony, but rather identifies a problem in the world as a reality. What he sees, this is how people relate and gather, this is how we should operate, in which friendship and enemy results. For him also, it's a very definite, it results in either killing or being killed by the enemy, or dying with or for friends. And you discover your ultimate allegiance, or this is maybe how you discover it, by concluding who you're prepared to die for and who you're prepared to kill. Smith sees Schmidt's account not as a template for friendship, but as a picture of friendship gone askew. So that's
just save Smith. Save him. Poor Smith is like, sorry.
So that is all the so now I'm going to turn to my title. So also means I'm not too far from done. So the friendship and the art of conversation. So I chose this alternative title for my presentation, as I would suggest that politics could also be thought of as an ongoing conversation, or that proper politics involve an ongoing conversation and a willingness to converse. Healthy politics depend on people, whether they're citizens or members who have mastered the art of conversation, my title. How you think about friendship, and whether you consider those with whom you engage in the polis as your friend, enemy, or perhaps even neighbor, will determine what conversation will look like. And we're still open to the idea if there's other things than that, friends, enemies, neighbors. So I want to end my own summary. I want to end with my own summary of a section. So this is that book. There's another book. I'll cover that bit. That I'm reading.
What's the good title?
An intimate history of humanity. It was once remarked when I sat. I was once reading the book, and someone remarked to me, your book has a massive boob on its cover. And I'm like, I didn't know, because I was too interested in the content. But I didn't really pick up on it. So this guy that writes this book, he's got a very interesting, so he looks at humanity through very interesting, almost ongoing difficulties of relationships. And the whole book actually is through conversations with French women. He's a British guy, and then he builds historical things on that theme from what a woman in a town somewhere told him a story. So it's a very fascinating book. And so I'm going to read little summary of a section of a chapter in that book that I thought is quite apt. So it's an entertaining historic picture of how the difficulty of conversation persisted despite different ideas of friendship and the political coming in and out of fashion. And it will provide us with an opportunity to think about our own mastery of this art as a circle of friends, even here as KRUX, and you'll see where it goes. And you'll also pick up on some of the people I've noticed, I mentioned as I went along, and yeah, some of the topics I touched on, or the questions about friendship. So here, yeah, we're going to get to a, I'll just put it up, you'll get it. Okay, so those are largely salons, what they call salons. Yeah. Except, yeah.
KRUX salon.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna read it as my closing remarks. So yeah, the author is Theodore Zeldin, and his book is An Intimate History of Humanity, and it's from the chapter How Men and Women Have Interesting Conversations. Why, after centuries of experience, are humans still so awkward, rude, inattentive in conversation, with even 40% of Americans brought up to regard silence as unfriendly, complaining that they are too shy to speak freely? The answer is that conversation is still in its infancy. History is littered with sayings warning us that speech brings trouble, and our silence may have us mistaken for being wise. In many cultures, it was not strange to sit together in silence as a way of socializing. Tongues were loosened only more recently, when philosophers began saying that it's impossible to know the truth. Things are complicated, and only the skeptic knows wisdom. The invention of democracy also required of people to say what they thought and express themselves in public assemblies. And yet, it was usually elite tongues only that were loosened to question the nature of things. Peasant silence continued. While some believed that to be an impressive speaker, when some believed that to be an impressive speaker one had to know things, most were too impatient for that. Rhetoric became the supreme skill. People were trained in the art of disputation, the technique of talking on any subject, even if you knew nothing about it. The ability to speak persuasively became the new excitement, the new intellectual game that turned politics and the law courts into entertainments and orators into showy magicians who stir emotions. I think Paul referred to these when he said, I did not come to you in eloquent tongue and whatnot. Those type of things were happening around him, the orators. But this was not conversation. The first known conversationalist was Socrates, who replaced the war with words with dialogue. Before this, monologue was the model for speech. The wise man or the god spoke, and the rest listened. He introduced the idea that individuals cannot be intelligent on their own. They needed someone else to stimulate them. Nietzsche might call this not my, and this kind of, he might call this just plain common or dangerous. Socrates wandered the markets and meeting place of Athens, asking the why question to whoever was doing. Surely they must have reasoned and thought it was right or just or beautiful to do such and such. But forward many years, conversation is not made just of questions. Socrates only invented half a conversation. The next rebellion came through the Renaissance, and this time it was a rebellion by women. The world's memory has still largely been stuffed with the names of war generals rather than conversationalists. To converse was understood to mean to live with, to frequent, to belong to the circle of someone powerful, with no need for speech beyond claiming one's obedience or loyalty. Speech etiquette involved military metaphors, defend one's reputation, form alliances, use words as weapons against your rivals. The ladies grew tired of this. A new ideal developed, which demanded the opposite: politeness, gentleness, tact and culture, Madame de Rambouillet is held up as the Socrates of her time, as she organized conversation in saloons. Sorry, I jumped before I read them. Salons. Sorry. Yeah, there's also a nice overflow there between the two. Yeah, she organized it in this entirely new way. She introduced salons as the opposite of the large royal hall. Salons were intimate lounges presided over by a hostess, where 24 people at most gathered. Conversationalists were invited not on the basis of their status, but because they had something interesting to say. And because in the company created by Rambouillet, they said them even better. Diverse people met in salons like hers for conversations which looked at life with the same distance as that Socrates favored, but instead of torturing themselves with self-questioning, they concentrated on expressing their thoughts with eloquence. She acted as a mediator who helped one's feelings pass into the souls of others. Horace Walpole, I think he sounds like an Englishman. Horace Walpole, who detested the sort of people who went to salons, became a devoted member of Madame Geoffroy, nevertheless. He discovered that however much men might dislike the pretentiousness of other men, the presence of intelligent women whom they wished to please transformed normally uncomfortable meetings into exhilarating encounters. And now I'm quoting him. He wrote a letter to Madame Geoffroy. I never saw anybody in my days that catches one's faults and convinces one so easily. Talking about the women in these salons. I never liked to be set right before. I make her both my confessor and director. The next time I see her, I believe I shall say, "Oh, common sense, sit down. I've been thinking such and such. Is it not absurd?" These meetings resulted in deliberate effort to keep up with all that was new in literature, science, art, politics, and in manners. The hostesses weren't specialists in any of these subjects. Their achievement was to purge the men of the boorish academic legacy that weighed on them, in which the purpose of discussion was to crush others with the weight of one's learning. Mrs. Catherine Phillips, who started a salon in London, described hers as a society of friendship to which male and female members were admitted, and in which poetry, religion, and the human heart were to form the subjects of discussion. These salons imbued the prose of the 18th century with clarity, elegance, universality, filtrating ideas through other minds, encouraging seriousness to be also light-hearted, reason to remember emotion, Smith would be happy, and politeness to join with sincerity. But eventually, each salon cultivated a taste that became tyrannical, so that they could no longer tolerate other salons. While they tried to teach themselves to enjoy contact with others and to value the diversity and discordance of nature, they often ended up worshipping their own brilliance or their imitation of brilliance, lapsing into conversations which were in effect counterfeit. Salons became as boring as a royal court, and people retreated into private conversations. The yearning for more private conversation grew, and the obsession with sincerity became more absolute. Only letters seemed an adequate refuge for the pondered exchange of private thought. So the salons kindled conversation between great minds, but they could not teach us how to converse with strangers or with those who had no pretensions. And I end with that, not with a quote, with that, and the quote. I think I don't have to say anything to end with other than all the questions that arose and that it asked of us here as a as a little salon of our own. Yeah, but also how we act in the world, towards the other, with the other, in conversation with the other, and yeah, holding all these different ideas of friendship up with their bad, but there's also some of the bad that makes sense. And how does it make sense? Or is Kierkegaard right? Is it just all wrong? Is it just neighbor? That is the last thing I'm gonna say.
Sure.
Oh,